And I guess we're live. Welcome to The New School Singer. I'm your host, Mr. Opera, and for the first time ever, now live. What we're up to today is playing Bullshit Detector. The Bullshit Inspector, to be more specific. Let's give it a go. So, start my track here that we're going to be looking at.
But it's more like an ah. It's more like an ah. And we bring in the full spectrum of frequencies again and we can hear the complete vowel. To become an amazing singer, you need to be able to hear spectrally, hear the vowels within the vowel. That is the most badass thing you can do to train your voice.
So, welcome to the Bullshit Inspector. I'm going to be reviewing some material by another YouTube personality, a much bigger one than me. Her name is Gemma Sugrue, and she seems like a lovely lady, but unfortunately, there's some problems with the materials that she's been disseminating, and I'm here to talk to you about those problems, and I'm here to help educate you so that you can not fall prey to these kinds of bullshits. So our system's going to be a little bit of fun here. We're going to watch the video and we're going to keep track of how many things are true. In other words, things I agree with. How many things are false. And then we're going to have an extra category that I'll tell you about. So when things are true, well, first of all, we're going to have this counter here. And when something is true, we'll hear this little sound, and, our counter is going to go by 1. We're going to have untrue things. And then we're going to have this third category of things that are just inexcusable and untrue. And that's how we know that they're coming up. So let's, without further ado, watch some of this video. Her topic is resonance, and you can probably figure out why that got me interested. I've been doing a lot of research and some videos about resonance lately, and so YouTube is showing me videos it thinks I would like to see, and this one triggered me quite a bit. So let's take a look here. This is Gemma. Very nice lady. Let's see. Let's get rid of those. And let's get this started.
The absence of a scientific understanding of how resonance works. Oh my God, have I just been cancelled from the vocal coaching niche?
We need to back up a little bit here.
In Ireland, they say you might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb, so I will continue with 4 reasons why I don't like the word placement.
Okay,
Welcome to
here we go.
Resonance for Singers Explained. By the end of this video, you will have a science-based and
Make myself a little bit smaller
of how resonance works. You, the singer, can manipulate your own resonance, and I trigger myself in this video with the word placement. So let's dive in. My name is Gemma, by the way, and I help singers perform, write, record, and promote their own original music. If you would like to work with me as your coach, make sure you check the description below. There's a link there.
Have to leave this in.
Artist career coaching call. So
and that is true. She does do that.
What is resonance?
Okay.
A resonator is a container of air that can amplify sound.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have to stop. We've hit the first untrue statement here. Let me move my counter over a little bit. It is not true that a resonator in any way amplifies anything. it's important not just technically, it's important practically to know that your resonator, your vocal tract doesn't amplify any sound. It filters sound. So let's move on a little bit.
Signal is inputted, which we create with the periodic, which is a patterned vibration of our vocal folds.
That's true.
This sound signal goes into the resonator to be amplified, to be made louder.
Not true.
The resonator is called the vocal tract. And now the vocal tract is this throat space here.
Myself over here.
Space from the top of the larynx up to the hump of the tongue, and the mouth space, which is the space from the hump of the tongue all the way through to the lips.
Okay, now it's not that what she just said wasn't true. The issue is that what she said is setting us up for something that's not true. So I'm not going to score it right now, but whenever you start hearing someone describe the vocal tract as two areas, they're setting you up to learn about a model of resonance called Helmholtz resonance that just doesn't work. And you can watch my videos on resonance here to learn all about that. And you can also, if you're interested, get in touch at therealmropera@gmail.com if you're thinking that you want some extra help with some of these concepts. And you can also support me at coffee.com under my name, Mr. Opera. So she had her plug, so I have mine. Moving on here.
Clarinet, your vocal folds would be the mouthpiece, and your vocal tract would be the body of the clarinet.
Okay, that's true.
The vocal folds are the reed that vibrates, and then the body of the instrument is the container of air that resonates, which is amplifying the sound.
No. Untrue. So just have to stop it because it's the same problem again. Oops. Oops. There's the same problem again. We're not amplifying the sound. So just not to nitpick here, but if you're going to repeat it 3 times, you're going to get it wrong 3 times. Okay.
Larynx walking around, right? So we're going to take our head off, and what you would sound like is just this.
So obviously what you would sound like is not that, because the sound that you just heard uses a vocal tract, but it's true what she's saying here. So let's mark her correct. Okay.
Intelligible buzz sound. Now put your vocal tract back on again and put it in the shape of an ooh. So we're going. So when you sing a note, any note, you've just heard me sing one note, but actually multiple frequencies or notes were created at the same time. This is called the harmonic series or the overtone series. The first harmonic, the first frequency in that series, the human ear, your ear would have perceived as the pitch that I was singing. Let's have a look at this.
Okay.
So welcome to
that's untrue. And it's kind of a really neat thing, and we're gonna get to it later because she does a demonstration that earns her a bullshit score, and that one relies on something called the missing fundamental illusion, and you can look that up and see videos about it right here on YouTube. It's a pretty cool thing, but essentially, when you pull away the lowest frequency, we are still going to hear that pitch that goes with that frequency, even though the frequency isn't there. Your brain reconstructs it. It actually reconstructs what the pitch would be, and it's not looking at actually what is the lowest frequency. What it's looking at is that there's that pattern of the harmonic series, and then it will fill in what's missing for you. Just like if you know something about how your eyes work, your brain is filling in a lot of missing information so that the picture makes sense. So technically, no, the lowest the lowest frequency that you hear isn't necessarily what you perceive as the pitch. Most of the time it is, but not necessarily. Let's moving on here.
VoceVista. So I'm going to sing A3. That's 220 hertz. That's 220 vibrations of the vocal folds per second. And you can see that first frequency there is representing that. Then there's all these other frequencies above it. So that first frequency of the harmonic series, the overtone series, the human ear is interpreting as the pitch, which was A3.
So again, that's not how that works. And while we're stopped here and talking about VoceVista and talking about what she's looking at right now, I really don't recommend this as a way to understand vocal resonance or even how to train yourself to do anything at all in any way. As we go on, let's keep watching and you'll see what I mean.
We play it back. The human ear hears that as the pitch. Let me filter just that bottom frequency so we can hear it. And that's a pitch. Oh. But now let's have a listen to some of the other frequencies in isolation. Oh, what the hell? That's an octave above. That's A4, which is 440, which you can see correlated there. 440 hertz, 440 vibratory cycles per second. That's A5. And so on, and they go up in this exact these exact intervals every time. The harmonic series is always a fixed pattern of intervals. So what the human ear interprets as the resonance or the timbre or the tone of the voice is everything to do with when I sing that A3, for example, is everything to do with the frequencies formed from 440 upwards. Now it's also actually...
Okay, so this is also pretty important. Resonance is resonance. And when we're talking about resonance, we're talking about something specific and something that you can measure. Timbre or timbre is not specific like that. It's not objective. A timbre it's a subjective description of how something sounds. Your timbre is not just your resonance. The source that you're hearing also has a big effect on timbre and a lot about that timbre. A lot of the details of the timbre, a lot of the specifics of the timbre are not resonance. They have nothing to do with resonance, but they still change the timbre. What the sound is to us, how it sounds. That's timbre versus resonance, and she's conflating the two, and that earns her an incorrect. But not yet a bullshit, because these are honest mistakes. I think that she's been just incorrectly educated on how resonance works.
With the 220 as well, so it's this whole picture combined is what we're getting as the timbre, but the human ear understands that first frequency is the pitch. And now what we can do is we can play around with
that wasn't true.
How we boost or what frequencies we make important in this stack, so we can make some frequencies louder and some frequencies softer when we sing. And this is how we change tone quality.
It's true. It's true.
So if I sing that when we go back to that A3 again, so if I sang so I sang one in a more like kind of classical maybe style, and it's more of an vowel.
Okay.
And we can see that there's a lot more activity, 3000 hertz, a lot more activity here, but it's pretty similar at the bottom. We've a similar harmonic 1, similar harmonic 2, but then things are a lot more boosted here in the upper partials, less boosted here.
So again, I would really, I mean, if you notice, the graphs, other than one being more filled out than the other, because she was louder, essentially, they look really similar, because these graphs are not telling you where her formants are actually peaking, what her formants actually look like. So this is pretty useless. I mean, it's useless anyway, I think, to be trying to steer your voice with a graph. And I don't understand why VoceVista is so popular, actually, with voice teachers, that they have to pay a lot of money for it. And I guess this is the problem. Then they figure, like, this must be useful somehow. So they look for some use, I guess.
Partials. And that's what's different about the resonance, is how the frequencies are, which ones are made important and which ones aren't made important. I'm just going to have to rant a little bit about the word placement, because it's very synonymous with the word.
Just again, I'm not sure if this should be scored, but that is the difference in resonance. But that's not necessarily how we hear differences in timbre, or how we hear someone having a different sound compared to someone else. It's just a different thing. Let's
resonance. So I think it needs to be addressed. I don't really like this word. And can I be honest? I think this word adds complexity.
And she's talking about placement.
In the absence of a scientific understanding of how resonance works. Oh my God, have I just been cancelled from the vocal coaching niche?
I mean, definitely true that absent an actual scientific understanding of how resonance works, we could say that placement, I don't know that it adds complexity. I think it's maybe simplifying things. I'm not sure that I agree that it adds complexity. I agree with her mentioning an absence of scientific understanding, and then ideas like placement and things like that making problems. But I think she's making plenty of problems with her lack of scientific understanding. So that's really important, I guess. And maybe we should not look at someone who's using placement, for instance, and think less of them, or think that they're not making any sense or something like that, just because our scientific understanding doesn't match theirs. And as long as nobody is claiming that placement is some kind of scientific thing, that seems perfectly fine to me, as long as you're not confusing yourself and thinking that it's real. But she's confusing herself here and confusing her audience into thinking that some things are real and they are not.
In Ireland, they say you might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb, so I will continue with 4 reasons why I don't like the word placement. Bye. Okay, reason number 1. Resonance is...
So I guess she's going to forgive me for this.
Acoustic energy on the move, molecules on the move, right? Dancing around. And the idea that could be placed somewhere boggled my brain so much. Second reason that I don't like is when you feel...
Okay, I'm giving her an untrue, because while it is true that resonance does involve some molecules moving, being displaced, it also involves the opposite. Molecules not being displaced. And if you are looking at a standing wave, if you're looking at a wave that's trapped in the vocal tract and part of this resonance thing, the way you would describe that wave is, well, it can be to talk about displacement nodes. Displacement nodes are areas where molecules are not moving around. As a consequence of this resonance thing, molecules are not moving. And then you have displacement antinodes, and displacement antinodes are areas where consequently a lot of displacement is going on. And these are specific locations that have to do with the overall length of the vocal tract. They are objective and often don't involve much movement of air molecules at all. In fact, it's the opposite. Let's go on.
Your voice, because it's all about placing your voice and kind of feeling it, isn't it? You're feeling sympathetic vibrations. So if you put your hand on your chest and you sing for me, ah, right, you're going to feel that vibration. Cool. That would be a reference for chest voice. Is that a good reference? I don't think so, because like really when you think about it, they're sympathetic vibrations. Your chest cavity is not resonating. It's not a resonating space. That would be a medical emergency if air had escaped out of the respiratory tract into the chest cavity.
Right, I don't know about the medical emergency part, but I do know that when we're talking about chest resonance, your chest isn't involved really in making the sound. And another thing I'd like to point out is that, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't use this placement idea. And if you're not familiar with what that is, that these are concepts that you would somehow be placing the sound somewhere, like in your mask, they call it, in your forehead or in the back of your mouth, or it's this idea of giving a location in your vocal tract to something, and somehow thinking of putting or placing the sound there. That's fine as long as you don't believe that it's true. And if it's helping you, go for it. Just go for it. Yeah, let's move on here.
Just sympathetic vibrations. Not quite sure how it helps and assists learning. Reason number 3, when people ask for the voice to...
So how it would help and assist learning would be if you try it and it helps you organize the way you move and shape your vocal tract, and it doesn't take you a lot of energy brain-wise to do it, then use it. If that's not helping you, then try to find something else to help you. That's pretty simple. But really, I don't think we do anyone any favors. If we, this is complicated because I'm kind of doing it to her. So I have to be careful not to completely dismiss everything that she's saying. But at the same time, we shouldn't be dismissing people who rely on very traditional concepts like placement.
Be placed forward. They're usually looking for something that probably sounds a bit thicker at the vocal fold level. So instead of something like, oh, we're looking for, oh, right? There's a bit more closure there. And they might want a bit more energy in the upper partials, in the upper spectrum of frequencies.
Okay, this whole upper partials thing, more energy in the upper partials. I don't know where that one came from. There is this whole singer's formant thing that is apparently a cluster of formants that are going to be around the 2500 hertz area. as far as I can tell, the singer's formant it tends to be there whenever someone is pretty loud, and a lot of sounds seem to feature this singer's formant thing. I think that when you're singing into VoceVista, for instance, and you start to sing louder, you're going to see it pick up a lot of things that it wasn't picking up when you were singing softer. But that doesn't mean that those things actually weren't there in both sounds. So, I think this is just, I don't know, this is just a problem of using VoceVista to try to do things it clearly cannot do. And that seems to me like a lot of marketing to voice teachers. It seems to me that Gemma is repeating stuff she was told, and that the people who told her kind of scammed her into believing this stuff, and that they probably sold it to her as, you'll be able to impress your friends and educate your students with this information. It's the unfortunate problem is she's spouting a bunch of bullshit. Anyway, here we go.
So instead of oh, we're having a little bit of a boost there. So it's actually a bit brighter. But guys,
I would agree that she's got a boost. It's mostly from blowing harder and using more closure, like she said. And that, by the way, is not a resonance change. It's a source change.
As the front of the mouth, right? The darker vowels are actually determined primarily by the front of the vocal tract.
This gets a bullshit. Because that is just not true. And I warned you before that we knew this was coming. When she mentioned that the vocal tract had two parts, when she mentioned that, I was triggered already by this information that seems to come from some group that calls themselves Vocology. But they're really, really, really big on this Helmholtz resonance idea. And it makes them come up with really, really stupid bullshit. So there are no vowels that are in the front of the mouth and no vowels that are in the back of the mouth. Vowel is not a measurable resonance thing. It just doesn't work like that. It's not a fundamental piece that we're building things with. Vowel is a language concept that happens when you have a speaker and you have a listener. It can be the same person, but you have a speaker and you have a listener, and the speaker offers some sound as a vowel. And if the vowel is accepted, then the listener understands the word. Well, they understand that vowel to represent that vowel. So that's what a vowel is. They don't have locations because the way we make vowels is by adjusting the peaks in our resonance, the formants, which we're not actually looking at here with VoceVista. And the brain is measuring the amplitude of these peaks, but then also the difference between the peaks and also what frequency they are. So your brain is listening to this arrangement of peaks, and it's coming up with a vowel. Anything that you do in your vocal tract that accomplishes similar peaks is going to accomplish that vowel. So yes, it's true that you can mostly change the front of your mouth to make like ooh, and that if you wanted to go E, you could have a similarly kind of closed mouth. But it's not true that the only way to make something that will sound like an ooh is by closing the front of your mouth. And it's not true that to change out of that ooh, you would necessarily need to open the mouth. So for instance, if I go into kind of a ventriloquist mode, I can go ooh, oh, ah, e, ooh, ah, e. And I made all of those vowels without changing the front of my mouth. And we can watch ventriloquists do this all the time. The reason they're able to do it is perturbation theory, which you can learn about if you watch my videos on vocal resonance. But perturbation theory tells us that actually there are specific locations where things happen. And it tells us that those locations, in a sense, are interchangeable when it comes to tuning our resonance. So, yeah, definitely not true that there are back vowels and front vowels. It is true that if you keep certain things adjusted in an arbitrary way until you can only move certain things, then you can come up with, look, these vowels are all in the back, these vowels are all in the front. And like I've ranted before, I think many times in voice studies, researchers were inadvertently partially immobilizing the subjects, then looking at, well, how do they move to speak? And the results that they came up with became kind of like, I guess the word is, they became like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a gospel kind of thing, that you had to believe basically in order to be a speech pathologist. So let's move on.
The bright vowels are determined more by the back of the vocal tract. So see how you can pronounce the brighter vowels without changing your lips at the front. It's all about the back of the tongue, the way that's...
So again, and you can do different versions of vowels with different parts of your vocal tract immobilized. And just because you did one doesn't mean that suddenly all the other ways of doing that don't exist. That definitely gets a big bullshit.
And a lot of the resonance is happening at the back. In fact, a really cool way to find out where...
resonance is not happening at the back. Well, it is happening at the back and in the front and everywhere else. Because like Gemma was just telling us, that idea of placement isn't actually scientifically valid. What's really weird now is that she seems to be relying on it in order to talk to us about resonance. I don't understand how this is very, very strange.
Much of the resonance is happening is by breathing in on the vowel shape and noticing where you feel the cold air hitting. So if I breathe in on an E...
Okay, you cannot... Sorry. You do not... She's equating some feeling of... what happens if you pump a lot of air through the vocal tract shape? It would make turbulence in certain areas. And in those areas of turbulence that have nothing to do with acoustics, well, I mean that they're going to happen where some of the constrictions are. And then what's happening is that creates this flow of air that increases evaporation. And you have this feeling of cooling from evaporative cooling. That's with air flowing constantly over the area. And you're basically taking out the whole volume of air from the vocal tract and replacing it with more and more new air. And you're drying out some parts of it quicker than other parts of it. That's what she's feeling. That has nothing to do with vocal resonance. I mean, it does, but not in the way that she's saying at all. If you watch my videos on vocal acoustics, you know that there's these nodes and antinodes, displacement nodes and antinodes. And as you get close to a displacement node, constricting the area is going to brighten things. It's going to raise the tuning of any formant that's associated with that area. I have my way of talking about them called areas of interest. And that is very simplified because it only covers the first two formants. So in the graph that she's showing you, that's all at the very bottom of the graph. But the reason for looking at that isn't because we're saying, well, the resonance is happening in this area. The resonance for all frequencies, for all formants, takes the whole vocal tract. There's no, as she said, there's no placement. The thing is that there's actually no placement. So you can't just now sneak placement back in to your way of doing things after you just told us that you're triggered by the word placement. How about being triggered by like the actually believing in facts that are demonstrably false? I'm more triggered by the concept than by the word.
I feel the cold air at the front. If I breathe in on an E, I feel it a little bit at the front and a little bit at the back. If I breathe in on an A, I feel it hit the back of the throat, and that's really telling me the tongue position and the larynx shape. Now, reason number 4 is that we're making sensation and feeling of resonance the primary way we experience it, and I think that that's a mistake. I think there's a better way, which we will get to. And if you think about like the brain,
I think
not
that's
having
true.
like really strong neural pathways for these parts of your anatomy. If you imagine like lifting your baby finger, and actually, lift your baby finger, right and left. Now lift your baby toes, right and left. So it's like really hard, isn't it? Some people might be able to do it. It might be totally impossible for others. But our brains have not enough, probably, neural pathways going to our baby toes, something I'm working on with barefoot shoes at the moment. But then try and lift your soft palate. It's nearly impossible to do, right? Now,
Well, I guess it depends what she... I mean, no. No, it's not completely impossible to do. So your soft palate, and here's where maybe we need better terminology. Your soft palate can raise and lower, but it can also open and close. And it's hard for me to tell which one people mean. Usually, they seem to be meaning that they want to make some kind of space between the back of the tongue and, shall we say, the soft palate. And people do that quite easily just by basically thinking of the sound, and they do it. There's also opening and closing the palate. And if I talk to you like this, and if I talk to you like this, I just demonstrated opening and closing it. And as someone whose first language was French, it doesn't strike me as at all weird that someone can just at will open and close the soft palate. And you can also learn to feel it. And the other weird thing about this point that she's making is that she threw in there that she's training with barefoot shoes and she's working on building up the neural pathway between her brain and her little toe. Well, we know about that, and the reason she's doing it is because those pathways are not fixed. As you practice getting good at lifting your baby toe, you get better at lifting your baby toe and you build stronger neural pathways. So this whole thing doesn't make any sense. I wonder what I wonder about, or what I worry about isn't that she did this. What I worry about is that she feels the need to do this. And that's the reason that this live stream is happening. That's the reason that I'm trying to talk about consumer affairs in vocal pedagogy. Because I think the problem is you, actually. It's not her. It's you. In the sense that she does this because there's a demand for her to do this. Instead of just saying, look, I can sing some things and you should come to me if you want to learn how to do those things. But there's a whole bunch of other things I don't know about. But she can't probably be successful like that. So she has to try to sell us that she knows some kind of, on knowing some kind of magic thing about resonance that you or I can't hear or learn to do in a very, very short amount of time. We're sold on this kind of magic idea of resonance that she's using, I think because you'll be trying to figure that out forever, because nothing that she's talking about makes any sense at all. It can't do anything for you because it doesn't work the way that she's saying it works. Let's go on.
Placement is intended as an instruction for tongue placement or larynx position. I'm more on board with that because this is very confusing. So she's wanting to say that that the larynx position would have something to do with sound placement, but people could have concepts of placement that have nothing to do with their larynx position. If they're, for instance, trying to sing like a spinto operatic tenor rolls, their larynx is fixed in a low position, as low as they can make it, and they're probably trying to shorten and lengthen their vocal tract with just their neck. So there's not a lot of variation on that. I would suggest that instead, what people seem to be using placement for, and actually quite successfully when it is successful, is that it's a cue for their proprioception, not just the tongue or larynx, but actually of the whole body. And it seems to be, for some people, a very efficient way to remember what coordination they use. So they have a lot of details in their coordination involving the neck, involving maybe the pelvis, the spine, everything. And thinking of those details one at a time takes too long. But if they can wrap that up into the idea of placement, well, that's as strong for them as thinking of a vowel is for her. we're manipulating the shape of the tract, the vocal tract, is by changing where the larynx is and changing where the tongue is, and we're also changing where the lips are, and we're changing how wide or how narrow the pharyngeal walls are, and we're changing the positioning of the jaw. So that's kind of helpful. So let's think
That's
about
true.
how we...
Those things are true, and I'm going to add one that she's skipping here, which is you're changing the outlet from the larynx into the vocal tract. And that's like putting on a different mouthpiece on the trumpet. That's a really big deal. And by the way, it also changes resonance. So narrowing in the epiglottis will really, really raise all resonant frequencies of the vocal tract as much as raising the larynx would, because narrowing there is narrowing in area of interest number 3, as I call it, and that's a displacement node. And that's really important to know. As well, when you're moving your neck around, for instance, you might be affecting the internal shaping of the vocal tract. So there's a lot of different ways that you could shape your vocal tract. I wish she would acknowledge more of them, but what she said there is essentially true, and I think she deserves credit for that.
Change the space in the throat, so the first container in the vocal tract, we can raise or lower the larynx. So let's raise.
There's no first container. There's no second container. Like when you drink water, have you ever noticed that first it goes in your mouth, and then there's a delay before it goes into a second container? No, I'm sure you've noticed it doesn't work that way. You've never had a sense ever in your life that you have 2 containers in your vocal tract. You know that that's one container. There also happens to be acoustic theories that work with just one container. So you don't need to feed your brain complete bullshit in order to have some kind of working theory of vocal acoustics. It's just not necessary.
Sorry. Let's practice with a lowered larynx. So I'm going to demonstrate like a really low larynx singing position. Lullaby of birdland, that's what I always hear when you sigh. So now let me sing.
I would say not just a lowered larynx. She has her larynx lowered, but she doesn't have her hyoid bone pulling down harder than what the larynx is doing. So that if she were to put a finger between her thyroid cartilage and her hyoid bone just before she starts singing, she would feel this gap getting wider between the two. That, to me, is indicative of a lot of the source changes that she's making, but also the acoustic changes that she's making. And another thing we should point out about what she's doing is that her neck is very protracted. And if you watch her, whenever she wants to make this sound, and actually a lot of the sounds that she's good at making, she will protract her neck. And that's going to go with what Complete Vocal Technique calls neutral singing. So that's singing without any kind of metal in the sound. And you can watch my other videos to learn all about that. And you can get in touch at therealmropera@gmail.com if you want some more involved one-on-one tutorials. So if you're watching how she's producing these sounds, keep an eye on the neck. I think that's really important. And then also keep an eye on her mouth position and ask yourself, is it allowed to move when she's talking later about giving things permission to move?
With a high larynx position, same melody, same key. Lullaby of birdland, that's what I always hear when you sigh.
So yeah, she did have a higher larynx, but let's also point out she opened the soft palate that she claims not to be able to feel or control, and she held it open the whole time. Whereas in the first example, she had her soft palate closed, and that makes not only a big change in her resonance, but it seems to interact with the source. She does have the narrowing that she's going to describe in the pharynx, but remember that that has a different effect depending on how high the larynx is right now, because whether or not the area right where she's squeezing is right in the middle of a particular area of interest is going to depend on that same raising or lowering of the larynx. So it's not that she's not doing the things that she says she's doing. It's just that she's maybe doing a whole lot more than that.
Demonstrate what the larynx sounds like on the move, going high, going low, hanging out in the middle, doing what it likes, being a bit musical. Lullaby of birdland, that's what I always hear when you sigh. So I'm not restricting myself to on either end of the spectrum. The larynx for me is meant to be.
So it's interesting because I would say that in this example, for whatever amount her larynx was allowed to move more, some other part is allowed to move less. And the reason for that is perturbation theory. You can predict that with perturbation theory. Whereas with the model of acoustics that she's maybe inadvertently, I don't know, but the model of acoustics that she's selling, all of this stuff is really weird and magical instead of perfectly expected and predicted.
Dynamic, it's meant to be on the move, and it's part of this gorgeous aspect of painting.
Your larynx is not, that's even, I don't know if that deserves a bullshit or just an untrue. But I really disagree with this statement that your larynx is meant to do this or meant to do that. We have the ability to sing with a lot of parts of the vocal tract, either dynamic and on the move or fixed, not moving. And none of those ways are meant or not meant to be. It's up to you. It's just up to you to decide what you want to do.
Voice. We can also widen and narrow the pharyngeal walls. It's hard to demonstrate that in isolation to the larynx position. They kind of go in, they couple up.
So to some extent, yes, because if you're narrowing your palatopharyngeal arches that are they're running like this down the sides of the vocal tract, and they connect at the top, and you can narrow this, but when you do, it pulls up on the larynx slightly because they're actually connected all the way down to the thyroid cartilage. However, if your laryngeal depression, especially if it's being driven by the hyoid bone, which sits on top of the thyroid, if that's being pulled down, in essence, from the point of view of the thyroid, it's getting pushed down. And now if you narrow the palatopharyngeal arches, you won't get any raising of the larynx because this other force is stronger. However, if your larynx was low, there may not be much effect from narrowing the palatopharyngeal arches or narrowing the pharyngeal walls in that way, because the pharyngeal walls may not currently be right in the middle of, let's say, area of interest number 4, which is a displacement node for the second formant. That's usually, that's area of interest number 5, this displacement node for the second formant. And that's usually in a particular spot if it's always in a particular spot if your larynx is high. But when you lower the larynx, you're going to change where that is, the acoustic address of where the place is where you would narrow in order to be making the sound brighter like that. Let's go on.
Position. So the tongue, so cool. Like this is what the tongue is like in the mouth. You have like the root of the tongue going into the throat space, and then the hump of the tongue at the back of the mouth, and then the tip of the tongue at the front of the mouth. So it's occupying both of those, like the back space and the front space of the vocal tract. It's like an elephant's trunk. It's classified
Well,
as
okay. I'm not going to score her on it, but there's no back space and front space. There's just the one space. And you can see how ridiculous it is now if you're changing the size of the vocal tract, the length of the vocal tract, where are these spaces going? What? I mean, somehow there was something separating the spaces. So what's happening to the divider between the spaces? There's just so much that doesn't make sense about this idea. And aside from the fact that when you do some really simple experiments at home, you can show that it doesn't work. I don't know. Let's go on.
Rostat, like it can go up and around, and it can like lift up at the side and dip down in the middle. It's like so variable how many positions it can get into. So it can bring the most nuance to your resonance ever. So the tongue is just like amazing. I do think people don't realize
that's
tongue
true.
Shaping can go into the space as well.
I didn't mean. Okay,
so then we can
I'll give her
also
two
shape
truths.
the mouth space with the jaw position, or the tongue position like we discussed, or the lip position. Again, hard to isolate these parts in demonstration because everything is working in concert, but it's really helpful to tweak little things.
I mean, no, not really. she just showed us that you can isolate these things in demonstration. I think sometimes when people rely on a certain set of vocal coordinations, which is the case for most people, like I rely on the stuff that I use on the stage, and the stuff that she's doing is really stuff I know a little bit about. And also the reverse is true. You know, she knows very little about what I would need to do on stage, and she would struggle with all of those things, just like I would struggle with what she does. That's a matter of practice. But there's also the matter of whether the things you were saying are fundamentally true or just true sometimes. And they seem fundamentally true because you keep repeating the same behaviors.
Once we've gotten the foundation of resonance locked in. And what is the foundation of resonance? The foundation of resonance is the vowel. A vowel is a sound we produce without.
The foundation of resonance is not the vowel. The foundation of resonance can be, you know, if you're into the science, you can have debates about this. You might get triggered if someone is talking about the time domain and you're all about the frequency domain and vice versa. I don't know. I'm not that into the science. I'm into the science in the sense that I need things to work. And because I need things to work, and because my estimation of the vocal pedagogy industry is so low, because I don't feel as a consumer that it makes any sense to invest in any of the vocal pedagogies that I've come across so far. Because of that, I have a very, very different sense of this. And I have a very, very different sense of where I would go in order to learn about something. I don't go to anyone who bills themselves as a voice teacher because I just assume it's going to be like Gemma's presentation here, which is a lot more about creating a sense that she knows what she's talking about than it is about actually giving me some kind of information I can work with. I can't work with this information because none of it is true, or very little of it is true. And what is true is accompanied by some kind of poison pill that makes it completely unworkable. So that's an issue, and it's a big one for me, and that's why I got into what little bit of scientific knowledge that I have.
Audible interruption or friction like that of a consonant, like tick, and is created by shaping the vocal tract. And my theory, my approach to singing is that it's all about developing aural intelligence, your ability to hear.
Okay, so I mean, that is true about vowels, but it's not true that vowels are the foundation of resonance. Vowels are something that a speaker and a listener agreed on, and yes, some source and resonance was involved in communicating information from one to the other. And then if they agree that was that vowel, then that was that vowel. But it's not the foundation of resonance. It's the result. So it's exactly bullshit. That's the foundation of resonance. That's like saying that, I don't know, that the roof is the foundation for the house. It's like, I don't know what, that's the dumbest thing ever. The foundation is the foundation. The roof is the roof.
Imitate a sound, because all the moving parts will work in concert together in respect to the sound that they have just heard. I really like to teach singers to be able to develop their aural awareness of subtle differences vowel to vowel, and I find that that's one of the most reliable ways to train a voice. Sensation and positioning.
There's nothing wrong with that. She's talking about using listening as opposed to, I don't know, I guess position and motion. And I don't disagree that often you just listening and then imitating the sound is a really, really important tool. Maybe it's the most important tool that any student of singing has. At the same time, that will only be true that it can help you when you can already do the movements that you're trying to acquire or you're trying to do. So if you don't have the range of motion for something, it is foolishness to listen to recordings of somebody doing it and imitate the sound and expect to change your vocal coordination. If you're not strong enough, it's the same thing. If the source of your voice, so if the larynx itself, let's say, is not strong enough to get a vocal fold closure, enough vocal fold closure to resist enough pressure in order to get the sound even started in the way that you would like it to be, and then also doesn't have the strength to continue providing that tension under load, there's no amount of imitating that's going to make it stronger. Well, unless that imitation itself is somehow training your larynx to get stronger. But then what makes it stronger is going to sleep, eating well, and waiting long enough for your larynx to adapt. That's just how that works. So yeah, you can use imitation, and it's great. But now saying that because imitation works, that means that position and motion should therefore not work, or therefore be a bad idea. That doesn't make any sense. It's just not logical to assume that because you found something that works in one instance, that's the only thing that will work in all instances.
Of moving parts are kind of like finishing touches and can be done in addition, but your most natural intelligence when it comes to making noise, making sound as a human being, lies in your ability to imitate what you hear. Your ears are so smart, and as I learned from the voice and neurology expert Heidi Moss, humans are one of 8 species classified as vocal learners. Our brains are wired for imitation, just like that of a songbird. And maybe you're thinking now,
Okay, so again, yeah, that imitation is a powerful tool. But I would not put her chances very high at coming up with, let's say, the coordinations that I do on the stage just by listening and imitating. That doesn't make any sense. I haven't seen her move in that way at all, unless there's something that I don't know about. There's just no way that she would get there through imitation only. That doesn't mean that necessarily she would need me to show her. If she were experimenting by herself and she were doing more than just imitating, then yes. Or if she already for some reason had the physical capabilities ready to go, then yes, just by imitating you can get everything that you can already do. But calling it the only way, I don't think is a good way.
Why would I want to develop the skill of imitation if I want to sound unique? Of course, everybody wants to sound unique, and yay for that. Let's continue that, please. Every sound you make has been processed through this vocal learning system, meaning every sound you make started as an imitation from the outside, from your environment. But don't worry, you're still original. Your individualism comes.
Well, no. Not every quality of every sound that you make started out as imitation. You can prove this really easily. Just get sick. If you're sick and you get some inflammation and it changes how your voice functions, you will get different timbres. But what is it that you learned? What is it that you imitated? Nothing. I mean, your voice is changing in quality probably from from breakfast until dinner. What is it that you learned? Nothing. The truth is that more things affect your voice than just your intentions and, your knowledge and what it is that you wanted to do. Your voice is also affected by other factors. And one of those factors you could use to affect your voice would be just learning new position and motion.
From your biological makeup, your unique vocal tract, the size of it, the length of it, the length of your vocal.
So again, those are non-learned. Your biological makeup isn't something you can learn, but the size and length of your vocal tract is something that you can affect.
Your hormones, your habitualized vocal tract shapes from inputs you've received, the accent that you have, the cultural environment, should you be quiet, should you be loud, your training, were you trained as a classical singer, a music theatre singer, your musical influences, who did you listen to non-stop on repeat? And think about the infusion of those sounds with other inputs, including your energy, your emotion, your intention.
These are all true, so I'm gonna give her a true marking. But the problem is that her actual point that she's making is bullshit. Her actual point that she's making is to only rely on imitation. And I would say from a new school singing perspective that you would just switch to imitation and then you can switch back away from imitation and back again. It's like changing your pants or something like that. Every time you buy new pants, you don't need to go and make a new pants pedagogy about how this is the right pair of pants that everyone should be wearing. You just wear those pants for now, and if the weather changes, change pants.
The pitch, the registration. I want you to rethink imitation and understand it to be a special talent from now on.
Oh my God. So I just noticed, like, this is my first live stream, guys, and I just noticed there's like, there's people chatting. So I'll have to figure out how to, well, I'll have to figure out how to. Hi, Tony Link, hello. And Veli Ulvinen, hello. And Olivier Dorian Constantinescu, hello. All right, so hi guys. I totally lost my train of thought, so let's see.
The skill you will learn. At the end of the day, resonance is an input-output system. There's input.
Okay, so at the end of the day, actually, resonance is, it's very rarely just an input output. Although we can get our voice to work more like input output, it's an input, and then you have a filter, and then you have this feedback loop. And actually, she's done some videos that I saw where she's like encouraging people to use a straw to sing into, and that straw uses this feedback loop. And basically, most of the singing that she's doing uses this feedback loop, so you have an input, feedback loop, and then output, and that output is not equal to the inputs. So you have a non-linear system, is what that's called. And that's really, really, really important, because this nonlinear system actually explains all of the stuff that we have pseudoscience and bad science to try to explain.
Then we create a signal of sound at the vocal fold level, and then we input that into the vocal tract, which then decides to amplify certain frequencies in that spectrum of frequencies and quieten down other frequencies.
Just again, there's no amplification going on. Like she mentioned, it's a filter. And you can't filter something and get more from the output of the filter than you put into the filter. So if you filter coffee, for instance, and you have I don't know, like 2 liters of liquid total, plus your coffee grounds, and you filter it. When you're finished, you're not going to wind up with exactly 2 liters total of water, of coffee. Some of that water is going to stay in your filter. So every time you filter, you're only taking things away. And when it comes to resonance, that actually includes the things that she says are being amplified. It's just that we take away the other ones that are not being quote unquote amplified. The word is resonated. The word that she's looking for is resonate, not amplify. But if she uses the word resonate, then it becomes really clear that she's just looping back on herself. So what happens is that the peaks we want to keep that we're resonating, they hang around longer, and then the stuff that we're taking away is not hanging around as long. So we're taking away from and we're taking away from the peaks as well as we are taking away from the rest, but we're taking more away from the rest. And when you repeat that process over and over again, you wind up with big piles of the stuff you resonated and almost no piles of the stuff that you were canceling out. And that's what you're left with. But the whole thing depends on continually adding energy. So you continually add energy. You're never amplifying. You're never taking the energy that was added and adding more energy to it without actually going back to the source.
And then we output it as we sing, and we will get the tone, the timbre, the quality of your voice. It all starts with what you hear. And I think we can overcomplicate it. And I also, with the moving parts, I think we can overcomplicate
I mean, I have to agree. We can overcomplicate it, but I think we also have to be careful that we don't oversimplify it in stupid ways. Can't say that word live, but yeah.
Sensations and the moving parts, and you've this pure access to amazing resonance by being a really good listener, and then being able to modify and form vowels well according to the style and registration that you're singing in. And then on top of
that's true. I think especially when it comes to resonance changes, your hearing is a really good way to do that. I'm not so sure when it comes to those source changes. And also there are certain resonance changes, if they are close to the end of your range of motion. So like if your jaw has to be ridiculously open in order to even get the source to be the way you want it to be, and to have your first formant high enough, shall we say. And let's say that's pushing you to the end of your range of motion with your jaw, then all the other movements you need to make in your vocal tract are going to suffer, because they have this close neighbor that's being pushed all the way to the end of its range of motion. And then also for every individual part, you have the same thing going on. If some body part is getting close to the end of its range of motion, then how precise it can be, and then how much you can feel what's going on, that all changes. That goes way down because you're near the end of the range of motion. And again, listening exercises will not resolve that problem. You can't resolve the problem unless you actually do something about the range of motion.
Finishing touch. You can start looking at dropping the jaw or rounding the lips more or humping the tongue up a little bit more. But
okay, so I guess kind of true, also untrue. What's a finishing touch versus what is fundamental? Well, that depends on what is actually required to get the vocal coordination that you want. For the ones that she uses, it tends to be the way that she's saying it. So she doesn't focus so much on range of motion, for instance. She doesn't care about the range of motion of her jaw, because most of the singing that she's doing is with her mouth half closed anyway. And making a small adjustment to her mouth isn't going to make a big fundamental change to her vocal coordination. But if the vocal coordination that you're using relies on your mouth being really open, because let's say, for instance, you're singing against an orchestra or with an orchestra, hopefully with the orchestra, sometimes against an orchestra, and you have no amplification, only resonance, no amplification, then you're going to have to sing with your mouth really open, because the audience needs to be able to hear you and you need to not die by the end of the night. And that's just the way it is. And you're going to have to treat that as the fundamental thing that it is. And you cannot replace listening. You cannot replace opening your mouth exercises with listening exercises in that case.
Extra touches. I wouldn't get too bogged down in sensation. I would again maybe use those ideas to lock things into memory for yourself, but they're not.
I really like that she's talking about locking things into memory. That's really good, but I don't understand why are we against sensations? For one, what she mentioned wearing the barefoot shoes and the pinky toe. As you get better at using different parts of your vocal tract, what might have seemed like completely impossible and your brain's not wired for it like 3 months ago might not seem that way anymore today. So you can't just... It's a little bit like, I remember my dad took me skiing for the first time when I was a kid. And it was downhill skiing. And after the first attempt, my feeling was, well, none of this is actually possible. Not like, there's no way the human being can move like that. And so my dad, being the smart guy that he is, just kind of forced me to keep going. And then eventually I developed the ability to sense in the first place what was going on. And I was eventually able to learn how to ski. And the same thing is true for some way of singing that might seem really, really, really alien to you right now.
Foundation of mastering resonance. And to master resonance is to master singing. I hope I have created some clarity for you today around resonance.
To master resonance is not to master singing. That's the big bullshit that she tells here. You could say that nobody who hasn't mastered resonance has mastered singing. But you could not say that to master resonance is to master singing. Singing has a bunch of elements to it. And when you master, I guess, let's say, a good portion of them, you could suck at a couple of those elements, but if all you've got is resonance, you're probably gonna have an easier time mastering the kind of singing that she does. That's true. Because it doesn't rely on a whole lot of things that are outside of the normal range of motion for most people. That's true. That's all true. But if you expect to be able to sing anything you want just because you've mastered resonance, then I have some bad news for you. It's not going to work. It's like saying that all you need in order to win the 100-meter dash at the Olympics is to master the gait, to master the technique of how to run. You're not gonna get there like that if you're not strong enough. If you're just not in the right physical condition, you're not gonna master the 100 meters. You're certainly not gonna win at the Olympics.
What I would invite you to do next is to go out onto the internet and start really listening to singers. Pause them when they're in the middle of a note and be like, what vowel are they actually singing? Really get into analyzing the voices that you're hearing and the vowels that they're using. If you are enjoying this content and you want to see more,
so I would that's one way of working, certainly. But I would add, while you're pausing, why don't you take a look at the exact position that their mouth is in? Why don't you take a look at the exact position their neck is in? Or the rotation of their head? Why not look at their shoulders? Why not look at the orientation of their rib cage? Why not look at whether or not the chest is moving a lot? Why not look at whether the back is more flexed or extended? There's a lot of things that you could choose other than the vowel. And I'm not saying that choosing the vowel is a bad thing. I am saying if you're going to choose the vowel, then don't think of it as the foundation for resonance. The singer did something with a source and they resonated that source, and the result was a sound that you interpreted as a vowel and that possibly they meant for you to interpret as that vowel. That's not fundamental. That's the result at the end of something, of the process. So I mean, I would say yes. She's got a lot of good points here, but this giant bullshit problem when it comes to resonance.
Let me know in the comments below if this was helpful, if you're never talking to me again because of what I said about placement. If you have ideas.
Well, let's just hope that she's as gracious as she was hoping us to be in the comments. Now, I do have to say, because this is my first live stream, and I don't know, this could go really well or it could go really wrong. So, do not go and leave her nasty comments in her comment section. I think it's okay to go and say, hey, I watched a video about your video. And, maybe go there and what do you think of that? But I don't think you'll be helping me anyway, or anybody really, if you're going around trolling and mistreating people because you disagree with something they said. So please don't do that. And let's just finish here with I'm going to finish with this vertical video that she made, because I think this one helps us to identify how this kind of bullshit process unfolds in a quick video. So let's see. Yeah.
But I didn't sing E.
So what she's supposed to be doing here.
But it's more like an ah. It's more like an ah.
Talk about it in a second.
And we bring in the full spectrum of frequencies again, and we can hear the complete vowel. To become an amazing singer, you need to be able to hear spectrally, hear the vowels within the vowel. That is the most badass thing you can do to train your voice. Get this, right? Train your ears. Great singers have great ears.
Okay, I had to include this because this is the original video that triggered me here. What she appears to be doing is making a case that she can hear spectrally, and that when she's listening, she actually hears these what she claims is a vowel within the vowel. And she's saying that she hears this, and the proof that she hears it is what she just demonstrated with the spectrograph, with VoceVista, and pulling off some frequencies. That is 100% absolutely certifiable bullshit. She's not telling the truth. And so either she's confused and deluded and thinks that she can actually do something called hearing spectrally, or she came up with a way to deceive the audience into thinking there's a reason to go to her for a bunch of consultations involving VoceVista, and that maybe one day they too could learn how to hear spectrally, and that when they do, they're going to hear these vowels within the vowels. But the problem is that there is no vowel within the vowel. That's not possible, to hear the vowel within the vowel. In order to figure out what quote-unquote vowel you're hearing, your brain is measuring not just the actual frequencies that it heard in the form of formants, the resonant frequencies of the vocal tract. It's comparing them one to the other. When she is pulling those frequencies away to show you quote-unquote the vowel within the vowel, she's changing what the sound actually was. She's changing what is the gap between these formants. She's changing the information itself. And then she's claiming after the fact to have heard this all along, that it was in there. It comes from first fundamentally misunderstanding what it is that's on the screen in front of her, and second, fundamentally misunderstanding what resonance is and how it works, to the point that she thinks it really is built on vowels, and that therefore that vowel had to be there, and that because the vowel was there, that's why it shows up there when she pulls away the frequencies with VoceVista. It all makes a kind of logical sense. So maybe she is really that crazy and that deluded, but I think what's much more likely is that she understands she's deceiving her audience in some way, and that she's deliberately doing that because she figures the longer you're trying to figure out if that was real, or the longer you're trying to learn spectral listening, the more money she's going to make. Kind of gross. I think that's kind of gross. So, gonna end here.